definitely want to open the door to a broader, larger discussion on that. And I will say, I want to start somewhere first. In response to the statement, I was asked to kind of give my feedback on it. And I wanted to just share my feedback to the statement that came out. There was an article in E&E News, and the title of the article, I guess based on my statement, was "Numbers Don't Lie, Energy Sector's Diversity Questioned." And in response to SEIA, American Wind Energy Association, American Council for Energy Efficiency, Economy, that whole group, there was a welcome statement about the killing of George Floyd and this movement around Black Lives Matter. And my comments were, the numbers don't lie. There is a clear pathway to increasing minority representation. And I'll be very clear, like people of color representation in the renewable energy sector. But for whatever reason, the work has not been done. And, I asked, and I ask you, what are you all going to do in terms of the people that you're hiring? What policies will be put into place? Because as much as we, of course, see what's happening in the country and the video of George Floyd being killed and how traumatic that is, but when we think about, of course, police brutality, we need to think about just, that's not where Black lives live and end, right? All of our lives are determined by the quality of our life, where that is our abilities to have, access to clean water, clean air, and, communities that aren't poisoning us, which is the foundational concern of the environmental justice community. But as we think about how we're going to handle our energy future, how we are going to address climate change, renewable energy is an incredibly important part of doing that work, of finding, getting us off of fossil fuels, getting us away from fracking and a whole host of things that are harmful to communities of color, indigenous communities, low-income communities, et cetera. But we have to also think about, how do we ensure that solar and wind is not just something that is done to those communities, done to my community, but something that we can play an important part in developing and being employed and being a part of the companies and the infrastructure that will create the future that we need. And I did present a few solutions in that article, and I'll say this before I get into my presentation. The oil industry has learned that there are really great ways to recruit people of color. I am an HBCU alum, and HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And our universities are the preeminent and the biggest creator of Black people in the STEM fields. And so that's an easy pipeline that I hope companies are thinking about. I remember finding a solar job recruiter on LinkedIn and asking him, are you recruiting in HBCUs? And he was like, no, that's not something we do, right? And I think as we think about how to have transformational change in what's going on in our country, of course we want to address police brutality and do that change. But until there's an economic change and there is a sharing of resources and a sharing of access, I think we will continually see the same problems come up. And so this article was just put out in E&E 3 days ago about this. And so, yes, we welcome statements, we welcome support, but I'm always concerned right now of performative justice, right? Where it's appropriate to look like we're doing the right thing, but it's and I appreciate you saying that, where we, now we will figure out how to really incorporate doing the right thing into everything that we do. So I challenge everyone on this call and all the women involved in this organization to think broadly about, who is at the table with you and who isn't at the table and why. and what can be done to ensure that in a year, in 2 years, and in 5 and in 10, that all of these industries that we know are already very male dominant, already very white dominant, not only have people of color installing things or being on the technical side, but then are also in mid-level or senior level positions. I know I count 2 women in your field specifically as mentors to me, Rose McKinney James and Nicole Siddharaman, who are, Rose particularly is someone I know is like a strong stalwart in solar policy out in Nevada. And, you know, I talk with her always about the struggles that she had, and speaking with Nicole as well, who's at Sudrun, just the challenge of being a woman of color in those spaces. So, you know, now is the time to put the action in place to move us forward. But let me share my screen. Let me stop pontificating. Let's see.
Is it working?
Yeah, I got to start it.
While you're doing it, I'll just say we cannot agree more that we love both Rose and Nicole. They're amazing. Rose was our keynote at our leadership forum a few years ago, and it was,
okay,
I would say,
so,
epic.
No, I love Rose. She's great. I love her. And so I'll just share a little bit about We Act and our history, and then environmental justice broadly, and just kind of keep it there. And I don't want to, you know, take up all the time. So We Act, we are a environmental justice organization founded and based in Harlem, New York. Harlem also, if it's part of Manhattan, you know, it's the Northern Manhattan community. And we have been there in New York about 31 years, over 31 years. We're really excited and proud of the history and the legacy of our work and the organization. And we are particularly focused on servicing the Northern Manhattan community that is changing to a certain degree due to, you know, the changing demographics of people who are moving into places that had traditionally been primarily African-American, Latino, et cetera. But we still are grounded in making sure that those communities particularly are able to speak for themselves in the creation of sound and equitable environmental health policies and practices. And Peggy Shepard is our founder. Her and Vernice Miller-Travis and Chuck Sutton were just activists in that community who saw real problems, and particularly around the New York sewage, the North Manhattan sewage treatment facility that was located right in our community. And I said all of this, but pretty much our goal is to mobilize people of color and then to create environmental and climate justice, and community-based participatory research is really important. I think sometimes a person may say, this is going on in my community, and the unfortunate response is, but do you have proof? And community participatory research is a really pivotal way of us articulating through data, through community science, all of that, like what's going on, how it's impacting people, and providing that data. Planning and practices, and we function at the federal, state, and local policy level. And so I work primarily in Washington, D.C., where We Act has had an office since 2012. And my work is dealing with members of Congress, the EPA when it was more agreeable, and other agencies and stakeholders to really figure out how we can do, make environmental justice a priority and really see change there. And I will say with the current House, at least on the House side, there's been more progressive thought and an embracing of progressive policy that has allowed us to introduce a number of bills like the Environmental Justice for All bill and a whole host of other things that consider environmental justice in that work. And we've also been able to work with Speaker Pelosi and a host of other notables to kind of talk more about climate justice beyond, you know, the very limited view of how to address climate change. Some of our focus areas, it's pretty broad, but that also speaks to the issues and the concerns of our community. So clean air is something that we care a lot about. Even now with what's happening with COVID-19, we're seeing the Harvard report that came out in March really showed that there was a strong correlation between air pollution and the numbers of people impacted by COVID-19. And so that's all kind of connected to the larger, longstanding issue that we have pretty much been very clear about. Communities of color typically are where a lot of our facilities are our waste facilities, power plants, et cetera. And because of that, and also with a number of our communities being adjacent to major roads and highways, et cetera, buses coming through, all of that contribute to high amounts of PM2, particulate matter in the air, leading to high rates of asthma, which then, with COVID being a respiratory disease, that's why those things are happening. It has nothing to do with someone's eating habits. All of us eat bad, as a country, but particularly in Black and brown communities and indigenous communities, the air quality is bad because of the long-standing environmental degradation that has happened over decades. And so we're dealing with a whole host of issues to service our communities. Affordable housing is something that's really important to us. Food justice, water quality, toxic-free products. As women, we think about all the products that we put on our skin. The FDA has not had any new regulations around personal care products since 1938. And so all of that too is an environmental justice issue. As women, we typically buy everything that comes into our household that our kids use, that our husband uses, whatever, but if they aren't safe, how does that impact our bodies? Leading to cancer, a host of things. So we have our hands in a lot of pots because our communities are being environmentally attacked from so many different directions. So these are some of our focus areas. And so when we think about environmental justice, it's like, well, what is it? And it is the response. The environmental justice movement is the response, as I was saying, to long-standing choices that have been made for communities that don't involve communities about where these polluting facilities are. When we think about Flint, the decision to switch from the clean water source to the Flint water source, which had many pollutants in it, and it was known, it was done to save money, and then it exacerbated this problem where people are now exposed to lead. So it's this continual structural problem where government entities at the local, city, state level, whatever, are making decisions that aren't always for the best interest of communities and not having those communities at the table. And so our work in the environmental justice movement is to counter that, and in many cases to bring attention to some of the long-standing problems that have existed. And so when we think about the civil rights movement and we see all of the protesters outside, I'm in Washington, D.C., and there's droves of people that are here, but, it's beautiful to see the angst and the feelings of concerns happening all over the world right now. The environmental justice intersects with the civil rights movement. One of the last things that Martin Luther King did before he was assassinated was going to Memphis to talk and to march and to advocate for striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. And that is an environmental harm issue. And that's also a worker issue too, in terms of jobs. Like, these men were given the least desirable jobs that put them in more harm, et cetera. And so economics, environment, all of those things are then compounded and in many cases worsened because of our inability to deal with race and white supremacy and all of those kinds of things. So those struggles kind of go hand in hand, at least in terms of how we see it. One thing that people talk about too is like Warren County, North Carolina in 1982. There were some PCP, there were some chemical spills that were just poured onto roads there. And they just, with no question or no involvement of the community. And these people literally put their lives on the line there to, protest against that. One pivotal, and again, I had mentioned the importance of data. One report that came out in 1987 was Toxic Waste and Race, which was put together by Dr. Bob Bullard, who many consider the the father or the grandfather, depending on who you ask, of the environmental justice movement. And that report pretty much said that race is the biggest indicator of where pollution is. Not money, not income, but it's race. So that means well-to-do Black people still have to deal with poor siting of facilities near them, et cetera. So that report came out in 1987, and the data in that report is still very much true now. And so here's just some really general information. Like, as I said, race is the most significant predictor of where a person if a person's likely to live near contaminated air, water, or soil. This is a pretty demonstrative graphic, whether it's toxic waste, access to water, et cetera. Black and brown people will be living closer to those things. And it's by design. Anyone who is familiar with urban planning or land development, if you're having a meeting on a Thursday at 11 p.m., where most people, they're at work. And these are really pivotal decisions that are made without community input. And by the time most community members hear about a project, it's already been approved. The zoning has already been put into place. And now, because we weren't included in the process and what we call meaningful engagement, then we are seen as a nuisance because all of a sudden, that's when we organize. But if we were included earlier in the process and made aware and maybe had conversations about what we would prefer versus what we wouldn't, I think a lot of lawsuits, a lot of problematic relationships between environmental justice communities and companies would be really avoided. And so familiarize yourself, with the principles of environmental justice, and it really speaks to just what we believe, protecting Mother Earth and the value of the land and not harming people. I'll share that afterwards. And just some more information about exposure. 71% of African Americans live in counties in violation of air pollution standards. 68% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal fire power plant. So, and an a Black family making $50,000 a year is more likely to live closer to a toxic facility than a white family making $15,000 a year. So again, that shows that class, as much as we want to be like class, it's class, people, it's because of money. No, it's race. Race is the biggest indicator. And so well-to-do middle-class people that are Black are still more likely to be harmed than white people who are living below the poverty line. And this is just more about that. And it's this report, the NAACP put it out in 2016. It's called Cold Blooded. It really kind of brings that all together in terms of looking at the correlation between race and environmental pollution. And I think the beauty of your organization and then the work that can happen through renewables is that it is a clear way and pathway to alleviate these pollution problems and create solutions for communities, all communities, but particularly communities of color that have been disproportionately disadvantaged. And just more data on the health, how that impacts premature health or premature death and asthma, and also higher rates of asthma and things like that. So all of those things are connected. And I know personally, a lot of why I became interested in the environmental justice work was I have a brother who's asthmatic, and I didn't understand why that was, right? Or even on a more personal level, I love to run, and I love, if you're going a mile, if you're going 2 miles, if you're going far, I ran 6 miles this weekend, communities can change within a mile, and you notice the lack of green spaces depending on how far you run. You notice the lack of grocery store options. And it's why does this community have a Whole Foods and then this community has a liquor store, right? And a lot of that is that land development and the lack of economic development that has happened in communities of color for generations. And so a lot of that work, just seeing it that way is something that inspired me to become active in this work. Another thing that I think would be really cool for companies to think about is how your including people, how when you're doing outreach around a project, et cetera, how you are communicating with the community. And one tool that we recommend or we cite is the Hermes Principles of Democratic Organizing. And it's really simple, like be inclusive, bottom up, like if you're having a plan to develop a project, who would this benefit? Who are you not thinking about who will be impacted by this? And most importantly, like I really appreciate number 3. It's like letting those people speak for themselves. Like I have no business telling anyone from Colorado what's going on in Colorado. I don't know. I've been there 2 or 3 times. I come in, I go out, right? And just all the same, no one better than the people living in a community can articulate what their problems are and also what their solutions should be. And so letting that community speak for themselves, working together in solidarity and mutuality and building just relationships, I think is really important. So as you think about how to be more transformative in how you are addressing race, how you're addressing hiring or and bringing people who don't typically exist in this space, like that is these are some very simple things that I think would help in those dialogues. And so like, yeah, we need bold policy and big ideas, right? And that's me in the picture. And then like, hey, we met Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But that's the beauty of, I think, being in Washington, D.C. is that we are able to interact directly with members of Congress as there is this zeitgeist and this energy about how do we transform what's going on in different parts of America through policy, right? And so, last year it was all about the Green New Deal and like, how do we take this problem of addressing climate change, but also do it in a transformative way to address race, to address poverty, to address systemic economic problems. And, the Green New Deal is one example, but there's so many other examples. And really, I think more than anything beyond legislation and policy, as people who are in businesses, if the demand is there for solar and wind and all of these things, that is an important way to push policy by showing that, the customer base is there, that by showing that people of color are benefiting from this, that, there's not only are you helping people from a health perspective, but you're employing people within their communities and they're changing their economic status through these important jobs. And even beyond a job, these are career potential jobs. And I know one of the challenges that I've heard from like the pushback on like, say, the coal and the traditional energy side is that, these are union jobs, they pay better. What is the pay like on the solar side? Is that really something that would create a just transition? Well, are they enough solar jobs? Or, are there enough wind jobs? And that's a real question that needs to be answered, as we're closing coal mines or, reducing our dependence on natural gas. What jobs are going to be created, and are there enough of those jobs in place to ensure that we can take those people along with us? And sometimes the answers aren't as positive as we'd like in terms of the reality of what that just transition would look like. One thing we're really proud of at WeAct is we have our own solar training program, and it's called Solar Uptown Now. And in that program, we are installing we're putting solar panels on affordable housing and NYCHA properties in New York. And in addition to putting those panels up ourselves or putting them on properties in our communities, we're employing and training people right in our communities to get that PV installation training, which, we hope then creates a career potential opportunity for them as we see us moving away from fossil fuels. And we're really, really proud of just the small bit of work that we've been able to do. And we're still continuing to grow that relationship, working with the city to really build that out. And we're really, really proud of that. So this is another example of how companies can, work with an environmental justice organization to begin that goodwill of addressing pollution and then also creating jobs. And I think one thing I know for sure is that people of color want to feel and be included in this, and they want, it's cool to, I drive a Prius, when I'm thinking about buying an apartment building, and this is something that I want, like, how do I have solar be a part of that, or have renewable energy be a part of the property that I own? So there's a market share that needs to be included, and there's also a career potential and a recruiting possibility that needs to be exploited as well for people of color. And so this is just some pictures of us like announcing our Solar Uptown Now program, and a gentleman that was employed through that we trained. But there's a way to address all of these things with economic investments and earnest attempts to diversifying the field. And I wanted to keep it short. Hopefully I didn't take too long, but I really want to make sure that we stay connected, and that we can begin having real critical discussions on how diversity of people of color in the solar, wind, all the renewable spaces makes sense. And it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I participated in the Clean Energy Leadership Institute, CELI, and I'm not a sciencey person, but as a policy person and a person who cares about our future, I thought getting exposed to it would make sense. I volunteered with Grid Alternative to put some solar panels up, just to see what that was like, so I could have a better understanding of it. But I think all of that is to say that it's great to be included here, but the work is like it's worth doing. And I think as we think about genuine, earnest ways to address job creation and diversity, and also this bigger looming problem of climate change, that solar and wind play a really important place in that. So I thank you all for inviting me, and I hope this is the beginning of more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corinne. And yes, 100%, it is more conversations to come, and so much important work for all of us to be doing and to be working on together, and to be informed and engaged. And that's why I'm super excited to be working with Vote Run Lead as well. And I want to hand it over just pretty much right away to Faith Winter. I'm super excited to have her. I want her to tell you a little bit about herself and her work. She's a national program director with Vote Run Lead, but she's also Colorado state representative, and I think has been doing some really exciting work with the state of Colorado. And so I'm excited for you to get to hear from her today as well. Faith, are you ready to go?
I am ready.
And thank you.
Let me pull my screen up for everyone. I am so excited, and I just want to thank you to WRISE for inviting us to be part of this. I am a state senator in Colorado, and so just to be 100% transparent, we are actually working right now. When we first scheduled this, I did not think I would be in session. I am in session because we delayed session for the coronavirus. So I am in the state capitol. We are debating paid sick leave, earned sick leave on the floor right now. So there's a division. I might have to rush out, and I'm going to hand it over to Star, and she'll be fine. So I'm super excited to be here. Very excited to hear from Corinne. It's good to see Kristen. And I, along with being the National Training Director for Vote and Lead, I am one of the climate champions. And I would say the country, I'll own it, right? We should own that. And so I passed Bill 61, which is leading climate policy on setting goals for carbon reduction. But I also ran a bill, so Corinne talked about a just transition. And Colorado is the first state in the country to have a just transition office, which was a bill that I passed last year. And in committee this afternoon, I'm excited to be working on the environmental justice bill that's going to increase fines for polluters, and those fines are going to go right back into communities that are impacted so they can use them in the way that they want to heal. And so there is so much overlap between policy and climate and technology and energy. And that's what we're here today to discuss, and I'm happy to do that. So we train women to run for office and win. We have trained more than 35,000 women all over the country. We are the largest and most diverse campaign and leadership program in the country. 70% of our first-time candidates have won. 35,000 women have been trained, and 60% of those women are women of color. And I'll just keep there's no secret here. You all are leaders in your industry. You're leaders on climate. You're leaders on energy. And we actually need your expertise, and we want you to run for office. So first we're going to do, this is what our agenda looks like for the next 15 minutes or so, is what is politics? Why do they matter? Why now? Why me? Next steps? And we thought it was really important to create the space to talk about Black Lives Matter today, to talk about George Floyd, to talk about how these intersect. And so this is a very short version of this training. And so I hope that you join Vote Run Lead back in the future on these trainings. So what is an issue or policy you care about? And if you could just put that in your chat box, that would be fantastic. It could be climate, it could be Black Lives Matter, it could be anything. So what is an issue or policy that you care about? And how would you make it better? Okay, so when we are talking about climate, when we're talking about energy, what are some issues? So we have environmental justice, ending qualified immunity, paid parental leave, community solar, healthcare equity. And then I want to think about how you would actually, women creating their own business. These are all really good things that you create in the chat box. Is what's an issue that you care about? Also, how would you make it better? And we need everyone in the movement, right? We need activists that are outside marching. We need people that are voting on the policies. We need lawyers that are actually writing the policy. We need business folks that are leading on the policies in the private sector. And so I just want you to think about that for a minute. So talking about politics, I think oftentimes it is so easy to just see politics as what's happening in the national news or on your TV, and really that's not what it actually is. So politics is the arena where ideas and power are exchanged and improved, right? And so really it's where we are working to exchange ideas. What is power? Power is the ability to act based on resources. And I think now at this time, it is really important to have that conversation about power, right? To talk about who owns power, who needs power, what does it mean to give power? When we talk about environmental justice, right? Corinne talked about involving the communities in the decisions about what we're citing. That's power and that's politics. Resources are people, money, and time. And I come from an organizing background, and really it's that organizing belief that we can build power through people that I consider to be my work that I do every day, and really work towards that. So we're working on those. So politics matter, right? And it's not just Trump versus Biden, and local politics really can make such a big difference. So politics impact you and how you act, right? Can you buy tobacco if you're 21 or not? Who can you marry? It impacts our daily lives. It impacts if you have a pothole right now. Politics impacts other people and companies and how they act, where they can store old cars or how they treat their employees. A lot of you were saying some of the things you wanted to make a difference on, things like paid leave, paid sick leave. That is politics. And politics impacts what society deems acceptable and safe. So right now, we're having a conversation about tear gas and if we should be using tear gas at protests, right? And that is us as a society coming together and having that conversation. So levels of contamination in drinking water, to the number of particulates in the air, and how much clean energy we have, and how we're propping up the clean energy industry, what policies we have to make sure that they are working. And then we at WRISE are so excited. Sorry, my keyboard is getting very temperamental. We're excited to work with WRISE because we know that climate must be acted on now. And we're in this time where Black Lives Matter, and we're facing a pandemic, and the urgency of climate change hasn't changed since January. And the urgency of climate change and how climate impacts communities of color. It is something that we have to do. We have to act right now. The urgency is now. The UN report said we have 12 years to decrease carbon, and we have to do it now. And that's why we're calling you to get involved in politics. You're the experts. You know how to make a difference. You know what needs to be done. So we need comprehensive climate change solutions now. And so what I want you to do, and this is going to be homework, but I actually want you, if you can, pull out a pen right now. I want people to actually write this down. And I want you to answer these questions for me. Why are you qualified to get in this fight? And when I say this fight, it could be on climate, it could be on environmental justice, it could be on energy. But what qualifications do you bring? Have you been working in the industry for 10 years? Are you really good on water quality? I know that one of my best friends who's a member is online right now, Belinda, and she is an expert in water quality. And every time I have an oil and gas bill I have to vote on or a water quality bill, I send it to her. She is qualified to be in this fight with me. Now I want you, for your next question, recall a time you tried to make a difference for yourself or someone you know. This could have been when you were a kid, in middle school, it could have been yesterday, delivering groceries to your elderly neighbor. But write down a time you tried to make a difference for yourself or someone you know. And we'll send these questions out. And if you don't have something to write down, don't worry about it. There's no right or wrong answers. Just write down your reflections. And now, to talk a little bit, Clarity asks, what is wrong and how can I help? And Justice asks, why is this happening and how can we change it? So think about, sorry. All right. Think about clarity. What you all wrote down in the chat box, some things that you wanted to change. So what is wrong and how can you help? And then let's look at that root cause. And the thing you wrote down in your chat box is why is this happening and how can you change it? All right, so what we were gonna do is have everyone break out into groups of 3 and tell some of their stories that those writing prompts gave you. But we're not gonna have time to do that today because we really felt the weight of this moment we needed to give room to. So what I want you to do is go to someone in your life. It could be another WRISE member. It could be a family member. It could be a friend. And I want you to tell your story. And the reason that we share stories is because you can't tell people who you are, you have to show them, right? Anyone running for office, anyone seeking to lead in politics can go out and say, I'm qualified, and I'm qualified because of XYZ. But when Corrine earlier was sharing with you why she cares about environmental justice, she said, my brother has asthma, and I didn't know why he had asthma. And then I started doing the research and found out that actually communities of color have asthma more than white communities. And then she talked about running, and she talked about running 6 miles. And I bet all of you could picture Corrine running for 6 miles, right? And you could see her. And she talked and described the community she runs through and say, even when I run a mile, there's a difference in the community and what they run through, right? And I bet you could picture those communities with her. And so Corrine didn't have to say, I'm qualified to work on environmental justice because here's a position I hold in my organization. She showed you why she's qualified to talk about environmental justice. And so the power of stories is you show people and you don't tell people. And you also connect on values, right? So maybe when we were listening to Corrine, we were like, well, maybe environmental justice isn't my top issue, but you connect on values that you care about her running through different neighborhoods. You care about her brother having asthma. And that's the power of stories. And also, you already have the experiences you need. There was an MIT study done that showed that women, to apply to a job, if there's 10 qualifications, needed to have 7 or 8 qualifications before they applied. Well, men would apply when they only met 3. And so when you think about that in terms of politics and getting involved and taking a stance, or you think about that in terms of running for office, women will often wait and say, well, I don't know every single issue about environmental justice, right? And so I don't think I can speak on this, but Corrine was great. She's like, I don't know everything about Colorado, right? And I can still work on environmental justice. And so stories also show that you have the experience you need to lead right now. And so I want you to do is I want you to take one of those stories from the writing prompts. I want you to tell it to someone you know, keep it to 2 or 3 minutes, and then I want you to ask that person what they know about your leadership. And that is going to feel vulnerable, going to feel a little scary, but I bet you're going to be surprised from what you learn about your leadership and how people see you. Because I guarantee you are being harder on yourself than others are, and people see you as being an incredible leader, and I want them to tell you that. So I want you to tell your story, I want you to be vulnerable, and then I want you to ask them what they know about your leadership. And finally, one of my favorite quotes, which is really important, is, and it's why we tell stories, is people won't remember what you did. They won't even remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that's a Maya Angelou quote, and that's also why we tell stories, right? We tell stories because that is what people remember. They remember the feelings. And so what's next? I want to give you some really tangible ways to get involved in politics. The first is I want you to publicly use your voice. I want you to stand up and use your voice. It could be on environmental justice, it could be on climate, it could be on clean energy, it could be on paid leave, all those things you wrote down. I want you to write an opinion editorial or a letter to the editor of the paper, or take a stance on social media, or give a speech. Because we have to get comfortable using our voice. So that's step one. Publicly use your voice at some point. Next is volunteer in politics. Get involved beyond your business and your organization. Find a nonprofit to volunteer for. Volunteer on a Get Out the Vote campaign, like your local League of Conservation Voters, or volunteer to be an election judge. Because when you actually volunteer in politics, you realize politics isn't just this toxic cesspool of awful people. You're going to make friends and realize that people are there with genuine concern for democracy and want to make a difference. And then we know money matters. And I'm not saying you need to come from wealth or know a bunch of rich people to get involved in politics. It's that we're actually saying that we're going to put our resources also where our values are. So put your money where your passion is and be part of something larger than yourself. The most impactful donation I've ever had, so I've run 5 races, I've won 5 times. The last time I ran, I raised $500,000 for my race. The most important contribution I ever had was from a woman that was currently experiencing homelessness, and she gave me $3 and said, I'm giving this to you because I know that you see me and you're going to create affordable housing. And I'm giving you $3 as I'm sleeping in my car. And so when I talk about making a donation, it doesn't have to be thousands of dollars. It can be $3, and that impact matters. I want you also to ask your friends to give, because part of building power is asking your friends to not just give money and time, but to volunteer together as well. And so although asking someone for money can be scary, when people donate, they feel like they're making a difference. So I want you to close your eyes for a minute, and I want you to think about the last time you donated to a cause, a nonprofit, a candidate, and I want you to think about what it felt like. And feel free to share in the chat box what it felt like to give. So when you ask someone to make that donation, when you ask someone to be part of something bigger, you're actually giving them the opportunity to feel that impactful. So that's your next step of starting to get involved in politics. And then finally, expand your influence. Ask your company about legislative activities. They need you. They're going to want to come and have you get involved. So who leads those efforts? Can you volunteer or participate on a committee? Are there opportunities to come testify? Get more involved in a trade association. Does your company participate in Capitol Hill? Are there committees you can join or support? And then finally, consider running for local roles. Sit on a board, join a neighborhood commission, run for city council, because you know what? Right now is the time, and we need you. We need you. I need you. I wake up and see the same world you do every day. A world where we are having challenges, and we have people outside the Capitol building where I am right now demanding that we say Black Lives Matter. We have people demanding that we take action on climate. We have people demanding that it shouldn't matter your zip code for how clean your air is. And you know what? You are the ones that can help solve this, but we can't do it by ourselves. We never do anything big by ourselves. And I need you to join us, and I need you to do that by getting involved in politics. So you are now part of the Vote Run Lead family. You have been to our training. You are part of our family. We want you to join our Facebook group because there's going to be a ton of amazing women you can share your story with and ask them what they know about your leadership now. There's women on there that you can say, will you donate to this campaign? It's really important to me. There's women on there that you can talk to about how scary it was to ask your friend for money and then how rewarding the result was. So please join our Facebook group. We are there to support you in your journey to lead a political life. So please join, share your experience. Please tweet about this at Vote Run Lead, Instagram, Facebook. We want to hear from you. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for creating this space. And like I said, I'm Faith Winter, State Senator in Colorado, National Training Director. I am also here for you, so always feel free to reach out to me via email, Instagram, or anything else in order to make a difference. And then thank you to WRISE. You all are amazing. We love partnering with you, and we know that by partnering with you and the great women that you are working with, we truly are going to make a difference and move things forward on climate and environmental justice and all the things we care about. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kristen. Thanks so much, Kristen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Faith. And I know it was sort of an expedited version of this, but you are amazing. And I am so thankful for your voice in the mix and for all of the pieces that you were able to share with our community today. And I really want to encourage everyone to stay involved in this conversation and connect with Faith and connect with Corrine and be a part of all of this that is going on. Please connect with us at WRISE. I'm so thankful for everyone that's been offering up their thoughts and ideas on work that we can do and ways that we can engage more and more. And I just feel like it's so incredible to start hearing and to continue hearing from amazing voices all across this community. I know Jennifer and I have been talking about lots of other organizations to continue connecting with and making sure you as the RISE community have access to, whether it's the op-ed project, which we've been talking with, thinking of Faith's comment about everybody writing an op-ed. And I see that Karen Conover is on, and we know that she's getting more involved with them this year, and we're super excited for that. And so I hope to have a chance for you all to maybe even hear from her too as that work continues. And I just really want to encourage all of you to stay engaged and thinking about, how we as a community can help support you in staying more engaged, how we can continue to ask you to be engaged, and you can continue to ask everyone around you to be engaged. I think Faith talked about this a little bit with, I've also heard this stat that in general women, she was talking about it in terms of the job stuff, and I talk about that all the time, the job requirements, but also this sense of, in general, women need to be asked at least 7 times before they consider running for office. And so consider this a moment of me asking you as well. If you were at the leadership forum, now that's at least twice that I've asked you, and I've told you for sure, I would like to see your voice in this system in any role and level that you feel makes sense for you. And we have your back in it. So I hope that you'll take that to heart and continue not only on your own journey, but on inviting others into it as well. And I am super excited for our continued conversations with WeAct and Corrine and their team, as well as others. So I just hope you'll all stick with us, stay engaged, keep the comments coming. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a lot of the links that were in the chat and other opportunities to engage and sort of keep this all going. So thank you so much for being here today. And any thoughts or questions last minute, I can stick on for a little bit, but shoot them in the chat. We are so glad to have you here, and we will have more soon. So thank you, everybody.
Yes, I can stay on a few minutes too if there's any questions on that as well.
Yay. Thanks, Noemi. So good to see you. Yay. It's also just exciting to see all the different names and people that are on here. So I'm so glad that you all were able to join in. And I do hope you'll take to heart the writing exercise that Faith encouraged and figuring out who you can tell your story to. And if you're hesitating, feel free to, find me and tell me your story. I want to hear it. So connect.
And also you do have the ability to unmute yourself at this point. So if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question, we're here.
Yay, thanks, Faith. I just saw one pop up, Faith. I don't know if you saw it, but for you, curious to hear your own story about how you got involved with politics and how you got started.
Yes, I will. I'll do the brief version. I am an environmental management major, and so thought I could save the world through science. And 2 things happened, and science is really important. I'm not saying it's not. 2 things happened. I won the best thesis at my college for Saving the Endangered Species Act, as well as working at a homeless shelter. And so I was doing service work in academics, and then realized my work was somewhat temporary band-aids to a broken system. And I really wanted to go do systemic change, which meant getting involved in organizing. And so I became an environmental organizer right out of college. And I would come to the Capitol and advocate for clean energy with college students. And it was my job. And I would teach them how to lobby. I also worked on college campuses to increase their fees by $1 or $2 to buy wind and solar. And I met Joan Fitzgerald, who is an incredible woman, the first woman president of the Senate in Colorado. And she told me I should run for office. I was 25, and she said, we don't have enough good people in office and you should run. And I thought she was crazy and couldn't stop thinking about it. And 2 years later, I ran for office. I was the youngest elected woman in the state at the time when I was 27. And so served on my city council for 7 years, where we became the first platinum solar city in the state, which I was very proud of. And then I ran for the state house. And then my last run was the state senate, which was the most competitive legislative seat in the entire country. My last one. And then along the way, I worked with the White House Project, which was the predecessor for Vote Run Lead, and now work for Vote Run Lead, because I wanted to take that invitation that Joan gave me and turn it into thousands of invitations all over the country to women to run for office, because the #1 reason women run is they're invited to do so. So this is your second invitation of the day to run for office, because we really do need your leadership. We need good people running for office.
That's amazing.
And then there was a question that was sent about using your voice on social media, and that is scary because you don't want to alienate people, and sometimes it's not the best place for conversation. And really, I would say it's about authenticity. So I think we see people on social media that are there to yell, right? And then there's people that are there, and it goes back to why I want you to tell your own stories, because when you show people who you are, it's like telling them, right? There's a difference between Karine saying, my brother has asthma and I really care about environmental justice, versus just, you need to agree with me on this bill. And I think you'll find people react differently. And sometimes you just gotta, there's trolls on social media, and it's awful, but taking the hits. So people always say, don't you have to have thick skin to be involved in politics? And I say, no, everything hurts. Everything that's ever said hurts. I don't have thick skin at all. All the mean stuff on Twitter and Facebook is awful, but I have resilient skin. I can get over it quickly. And it's because I know that for every mean comment from a troll online, it probably reached 10 people that inspired them. And just trying to remember who your audience is. You're not trying to change the mean person's mind. I call it the grandma test, right? Does your story influence a grandma that read it somewhere, right? And that's like the person you're trying to actually reach.
And then there was another just quick one, and then we'll probably, if people feel free to add more into the chat or things like that, but tips for building personal and professional connections to help you spread your message or run for a position in your community of support.
That's a great question. So one, there's just the logistics of it, the really boring part of getting all your contacts together, right? And it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be some sort of platform you buy, but literally just getting all your stuff together. And then I would say it's politicizing your base, which is why some of the actions I said was ask a friend for money or ask a friend to volunteer with you on a campaign, because showing people they can make a difference. And so that if you are thinking about running or you want to get more politically active, that they've had a positive experience with you. Because they're going to remember that positive experience, right? It goes back to people remember how you made them feel. So bringing folks along, creating positive experiences, showing them that they make a difference in small increments. Maybe the first time is just signing a petition. Maybe the second time is just sharing an email, right? And so it's starting with where people are at, and knowing, if there are a bunch of moms trying to get to soccer practice in time, or they're a dentist that, is just opening back up because of coronavirus and worried about how to make their business work. Start with where people are at and bring them along in a positive way. And that's the best way to keep them connected.
I love that. And then maybe I'll just ask one more and then we'll wrap it up, which is if folks that have stuck around for the whole thing walk away really only remembering one thing from all of this, what do you, Faith, hope most that would be?
Well, I'm going to do two. I'm just going to cheat.
Right. Fair enough.
The first is that politics can actually be very positive and engaging. And it's so easy to just look at the national media and think it's awful, when really I've made lifelong friends working in politics and have made a difference. So local politics is very different than what you see nationally. So get involved locally, you'll have a very positive experience. And the second is tell stories, because that shows who you are and it's not telling who you are. And it's the best way to start changing hearts and minds.
I love that. Storytelling is so important. And just one more time, all of your voices are so important and so needed. So please stay engaged and connected and let us know how we can help. Thank you for connecting with all of us. We look forward to talking more soon. And if you need anything, reach out, please. All the best, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.